Hey friends, are you suffering a little bit from beginning of the year blahs and blues? Maybe you're wondering if you're going to do anything impactful and meaningful this year? Well, I'll tell you what, hold on a second, we'll start talking about it.
Sometimes the best place to look for God is on the fringe of our own faith. This is a place for you.
Hey everybody, my name is Don Zlati. I am your cruise director here for On the Fringe of Faith. This is a digital Christian podcast that we're hoping that will provide you space to explore your faith, ask some questions, and maybe just walk along beside us. I can't promise you I'll have all the answers on the planet, but I certainly enjoy walking with people as they kind of discover their faith. If you are interested in this podcast and you're wanting to stay kind of in the know, if you could subscribe or click follow and like, that would be fantastic. Something else, this podcast works a lot better when you comment and ask questions. And so feel free to do that. And I promise that on a later episode, I will get to those questions because you matter and you're loved. And I want to make sure that that we get to spend time together in a meaningful sort of way. So I asked the question, have you ever felt like you didn't feel like you were created for a purpose? Like for some crazy reason the world has got more important things to do than to worry about you. Or maybe you feel so insignificant that you think that maybe God has nothing planned for you. I know that my whole life I've been trying to please people. It started with my parents. Maybe you guys can feel me on this. You know, you just want mom and dad to notice you or say that you're doing a good job. My parents were going through a divorce, so they had other things that were kind of stressed out. And and at that time, when you're in the thick of it, you don't really realize that your parents, they do love you, but at that moment you feel insignificant, and it's a very difficult time. Maybe you're having that same problem. Maybe it's not with your parents. Maybe it's you're having that problem at work. Where like you bust your butt day in and day out, and it's just like why I just don't feel like I'm making any headway. It could be that you're feeling this way in your relationship. Maybe your love language is quality time. That my wife's love language is quality time, and if you ever want to hear more about love languages, I'd be glad to do an episode on that. Just let me know. But her love language is quality time. And if I don't spend quality time, that doesn't mean sitting across each other or watching a movie. That means like going out and hanging out where she is my number one. And she knows that my love language is affirmation, which basically means I need to be told that what I do and what I am doing makes a difference and that I'm being impactful. Maybe this is something that you can relate to. The world gives us every reason to doubt ourselves and to doubt our self-worth. We don't really do a good job of leaning into what God has planned for us because the other voices, the voice of the world, the voice of folks around us, we're never seeming to be enough. And that can lead to a depression and anxiety. And to be honest with you, that we see that rampant. So if you're experiencing depression and anxiety, you're not alone. And I'm not saying that to lessen the intensity that you're feeling. I'm just saying that this world has a funny way of creating this feeling for us. Now, I come from a generation where sucking up your feelings was all important. We didn't do a whole lot of feeling sharing. In fact, the Gen X is we're like the silent but deadly, so to speak. We don't really talk about our feelings. We get that from our parents and, our grandparents who absolutely never shared anything. Now, as we kind of moved into the millennials and Gen Z, where I'm hoping some of you are, emotional intelligence became a big part of who you are. And I'll be honest with you, it takes a lot for me to understand that. But I do know this. I've met too many young people who are really, really struggling with that feeling like they just don't matter. And I get it. I get how that could possibly be, because even growing up the way I did, where it was kind of rub some dirt on it, move on, I still understand what it means to feel like you just don't count. Like, God, why did you even put me on this earth? I just don't feel like I'm significant to anybody. Am I lovable? What's going on? Is my whole life going to be like this? Now, I will tell you that more and more people, especially now, the internet's a wonderful thing, but even though it's kind of brought the world to all of us, there's a couple things that we need to understand. It also has put a lot of distance. We don't really have face to face outside of the internet as much as we used to. And so we don't really have the opportunity to build these strong relationships and have, kind of a posse that's at your back. We're really kind of moving toward that. Each and every one of us is our own warrior in this world. And that's hard, man. That's a hard place to be. That's a place where the beatings come, but there's nobody there to help deflect them. And so I get it. And I want to make sure that, in this episode, if nothing else, that I love you and that you matter to me. And I know that you matter to God. And I want to give you that above anything else. But the person I want to talk to about today is a chick named Rahab. And, we don't usually jump into the Old Testament. I don't do that usually because, nowadays we seem to use things out of the Old Testament to smack people around. I just don't want to do that. Rahab has a great story. She was a person that lived in a city named Jericho. That may be familiar, even if you're not really all that biblically inclined. Jericho was if you've heard this story, it's the place where the Israelites marched around and blew trumpets and the walls came down. You may have heard that story, maybe not, but I'll give it to you. God had promised the Israelites this land. We called it the Promised Land, and it was something God had promised generationally, and it was time to claim that promise. And so he had Moses send out spies to go check it out. I haven't had at least somebody else tell me that they went and it was really good. This is kind of normal. But in this particular case, it was very important because God was going to fulfill a promise and he wanted the people to succeed. Spies went out and they got to this place called Jericho. Now, the people at Jericho weren't just going to fling open the doors and say, oh, we're going to give you our city, go ahead and take it. We're not going to put up a fight. They were a warring nation. They had a city with a wall around it that was quite impressive. I forget the dimensions of the wall, but by any standard, nothing short of a divine miracle was going to take these things down. And they knew that the Israelites were starting to kind of shake their sabers a little bit, right? Getting ready for a fight. They had heard that news from, around, and they had their spies too. So they were really expecting spies to show up, and they were going to give them the sort of welcome that you would expect a spy to get, which was a slow, painful death. But there was this woman, Rahab, and she had been hearing stories about the God that these people, these Israelites, were following. And it intrigued her. Because, where she was from, they had a lot of weird, wacky sort of beliefs. Some of them were a little bloody. And she heard about this God that was willing to do whatever it took to make his people safe. And she got interested a little bit. And she wanted to know a little bit more. Now, I need to stop there and let you know that by today's standards, Rahab was a prostitute, and I can't sugarcoat that any other way. She was a lady that sold herself for money. Now, back then, that was a big stigma, and even today it's a stigma, but with OnlyFans and everything else going on, we've kind of changed the way we look at sex, not for the better. So this lady made her living by sleeping with men. And the two spies showed up, and she knew that they were going to get killed if they got caught. So she invited them into their house. Now, I'm going to tell you my take on this, and you can take this or leave it. I don't think that two grown men went to a prostitute's house to have cheese curd. I think that they were going to partake, and it just so happened that this was all part of God's plan. And in their debauchery, God brought something amazing out of it, which is kind of what God does. She ended up hiding these spies, these Israelite spies. And then when all was clear, they scrambled down the wall, and they told her, okay, since you were honest with us and you treated us fairly. I mean, they didn't, look at her, well, because you're a prostitute, we're going to treat you like crap. They saw her for what she did, what she did was she protected them. And she did that because she wanted to know more about Yahweh, this God that they followed. And so they said, I'll tell you what, we're going to be coming, put a red, piece of cloth out your window and you will be spared. All your family would be spared. Everybody that's in that room would be spared. Now, I thought about this quite a little bit. How much confidence did these two spies have in God, right? Keeping his promise and his word that they were going to prosper, that they would be able to offer this to this woman, this Rahab, and know that it was going to be fulfilled. I mean, that takes quite a little boldness, right? And so by saying what they said, they basically guaranteed that Rahab's family, at least the immediate family, we don't know very much about that, would be safe when the Israelites came. And eventually the story is that they came, walked around the wall for a few days, and then blew their horn, and then everything came a tumbling down. And true to form, God's people, the Israelites, spared Rahab. Now, you would think that that would be the end of that story. Kind of significant in the fact that she spared two men, but really in the whole scheme of things, you know, she was just a woman at the right place, the right time. But she was curious about God, Yahweh, the Israelite God. And she wanted to know more. You know, the Israelites, when they came and got her after the battle and everyone had been killed, they could have treated her like crap. They could have said, well, you're just a dog, you know, you're just a two-bit prostitute, and, you know, we're just not going to, you know, you just stay away from us. But they did something really amazing. They took her in. They figured if God was willing to spare her, then she was worth being spared completely. Pastor, what does this all mean? How does this even affect me whatsoever? Well, let me tell you. She's just a normal person in desperate times doing whatever it took to survive. She trusted that God was going to keep his promise to her, and God did this. She became a member of that Israelite community. No kidding. Full member. No one looked at her and said, you're just a nasty, nasty prostitute. No, no, no. In fact, a man named Solomon actually married her. Made her legit. Now, think about that, because back then that would have been a big deal. And if the story would have stopped there, it's kind of a cool story, right? It kind of shows you, for those of us that are always wondering, am I doing enough? Is what I'm doing in this world really impactful? We could say yes, right? I did the right thing. I followed what God had asked me to do and what I felt like was the right thing. And in turn, I feel like, you know, Lord, thank you. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for giving me a life-changing experience. And that would have been enough. Except here's the trick, right? Here's the caveat that we never count on. That God's grace is greater than our expectation. That we chalk up what we think we deserve, good, bad, indifferent, and we lay it before God, and God says, yeah, but you're mine, and I love you, and I created you for a purpose. So Rahab, the prostitute, marries into the Israelite people. And if you look at the genealogy of Jesus Christ, you'll find her in that genealogy. In other words, Jesus is from her bloodline. Now think about that for a moment. God, who we always think, why could God love somebody like me? Or why did he create me for, you know, I don't seem like I have a purpose. And yet God did an amazing thing through a woman that was just willing to say yes, be faithful. So I wanted to give you this. This is from the book of Hebrews. It says, do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God. Was cosmic, right? That I was part of a plan that was set in motion before time began. If you would have told me when I was in my 20s that I was going to be preaching and I was going to be teaching and that God was going to have a big point in my life, I probably would have popped you in the mouth. Funny how God takes somebody like me, a sinner, bad, 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 and washed me clean so that I could actually do what he asked me to do, what my purpose was. So here's the question I have for you, and I think this is going to be a new segment. I'm going to end my episodes this way because I really, really want to hear from you. What do you think God's purpose for you is? Maybe you're just scared of naming it. Maybe God has placed on your heart, you need to do kind things for these folks. You need to, take care of the sick. You need to do this. Maybe these are things that are being placed on your hearts. What do you feel? And I'll be honest with you, it's okay not to have that answer. But I would love to share that moment with you. So if you want to take a moment, you can do that in the comment section. If you're shy, you can just direct message me. If you don't know, just say, I don't know what God is planning. And I promise you, we will walk together as we try to figure out. Because, folks, you matter. And you're loved. Until next time, I'll see you later.